I recently spent 15 hours exploring Painterly 3D stylization, and I created this result. Over the next 10 or so minutes, I'll walk you through the entire human-made production process, and hopefully leaving you with enough knowledge to explore similar looks in your own projects. If we've not met yet, my name's Merlin. I'm a professional 3D artist, animator and educator, and in my spare time, I love exploring experimental styles of animation. I'll be sure to include video chapters below, and I'll jam-pack the description full of useful links. Let's jump right in. So to set the scene a little, the piece was inspired by all things spring. One reference that's always stuck with me is the lovely spring sequence in Disney's Bambi. Beautifully animated animals waking up again after the long winter, with the whole forest back in bloom. A book called Dreamworlds by Hans Backer has a really interesting section on the old multiplanar cameras Disney used back in the day. And due to the technical constraints, it wasn't feasible to do much more with these paintings other than simple parallax to animate the scenes. Now, even in their static state, they're gorgeously romanticized and jam-packed full of atmosphere and emotion. I've always been a little curious to see how these could look if they were truly fully animated. How would their paint strokes behave, and how could I achieve similar results with the modern tools I use on a daily basis? These are all the questions that underpinned this whole animation experiment, and to get the ball rolling in the background here are some loose, quick style frame paintings that became my guiding star for the rest of the project. For the main subject, I landed on a traffic light. Its cold, industrial, and its man-made qualities I felt could contrast nicely against the organic, overgrown bloom I was aiming to animate. The whole piece would also invoke this sort of nature-reclaiming feeling, and I really enjoyed the stop-start and proceed with caution connotations, leaving the message wide open to a viewer's interpretation. Let me know what you draw from it in the comments below. There was no need to be too precious with perfect topology or picture-perfect textures. The models just need to serve as landmarks for the paint style to grab onto, as it's all going to get distorted and broken up in comp later. My general rule of thumb is to develop everything to around 70 to 80% and avoid getting lost in the details too early. For rigging, I opted for Blender's native rubber hose style bendy bones rig. It's a multi-point control setup where an overarching lattice drives the main deformation, and each controller bends and twists that hidden lattice along a smoothed arc. It's simple to use, but a little intricate to set up, so I'll include some great tutorials in the video description below. For the foliage, I used my 3-leaf pack on Gumroad as a starting point and gave the PBR textures a hand-painted makeover. A minor hurdle I had to overcome here was not being able to achieve proper translucency on the leaves as I was rendering everything in Eevee. So a hacky way around this was to create a second leaf material on the underside of each foliage, and in this shader I used a noise texture to mask the emission factor, creating the illusion of dappled lighting peeking through the leaves. It's very hacky, but the translucency is one of the most magical features, and I felt it was close enough replication to add rather than not. Now, the growth animation itself runs on the classic geometry proximity setup. After scattering a bunch of points across your mesh, you create a collection filled with all your different foliage elements, and you ask Blender to randomly choose between those to scatter across the different instances. To create the basic scaling effect, you add a sphere to your scene and ask Blender to calculate the distance from the sphere to your base mesh. This value is plugged into the scale of the instances, making the plants grow as the invisible sphere nears and shrink when the sphere moves out of frame. Again, I'll link some strong tutorials for this in the description. This is a great first step, but on its own, the scaling can feel a little dull and underwhelming. True plant growth has so much more variation to it, and in the end, the best approach was to roll up my sleeves and just hand animate the instances themselves. Vines growing along curves, stems bending open, twists gradually straightening, and flower heads opening through blend shapes. All timed to animate alongside the overarching scaling animation. This gave the growth a lot more dynamism, and to complete the rest of the 3D scene, I added some rudimentary butterflies flying along a curve path, and 2 unique lighting setups for both the day and night segments. The transition was more or less just a crossfade between these 2 lighting collections and HDRIs. And on that note, it's a good time to move on to more of the stylistic choices I made to begin returning the project to a more painterly look. Step 1, of course, was to give everything a hand-painted texture. The foliage maps you saw earlier, the sky, the traffic light, the model itself, all received raw base coat treatment by hand. And this looked great. It's a lot of fun to do, but it's still only the groundwork. The painterly marks still conform perfectly to your 3D model, so your object keeps those crisp, razor-sharp 3D edges. And real paintings are full of so much more distortion and variation in edge detail. A natural next step in a package like Blender would be to use something like the brushstrokes add-on, scattering thousands of strokes across your model. This roughens things up quite well and creates that edge breakup, but it can be extremely taxing even on high-end machines. So here's a cheap hack I landed on instead. Assuming it's a blotchy texture with a good amount of mixed light and dark tones, I duplicated the material and plugged the albedo into the alpha channel, turning it into a black and white map driving the transparency. Then on the mesh, I added a solidify modifier to the object and told it to use the second material slot for the extruded shell. The distance of the solidify effect now controls the distance of your painterly splotches away from the original mesh. And in the shader side, you can crank these values to reveal more or less of that second material, breaking up the edges and adding a hand-painted roughness to the otherwise clean 3D model. It's not perfect for all models, but in this instance it worked quite well and quite cheap on my system. Now I needed to establish some rules of physicality that felt right for the piece, and the rule of thumb I landed on was simple. If a surface is hard or inactive, its paint marks are still. But the moment something moves or needs to convey energy, the stroke should animate. The paint stroke should carry the energy through the piece. And the bulbs were a nice example of both states at once. They don't move, but they do switch on. So each one had an animated paint layer with its own opacity wide directly to the lights themselves. So when the lights turned on, the paint comes alive and would flicker, and when the lights shut off, that paint layer vanishes, reacting to the energy of the scene. Now the sky takes this rule a little further in the context of real paint marks. To convey energy of motion, you might elongate the strokes in that direction. The camera gave the perfect place to put this into practice, replicating motion blur with elongated painterly streaks. Now for the sky, I did actually turn to the brushstrokes add-on to create the painted marks scanning across the whole surface, and I plugged the sky texture into the paint marks themselves so the marks would be coloured to the background painting. Now the brushstroke add-on allows you to steer these paint marks using flow curves, and instead of following the silhouettes of the clouds, I decided to run this perfectly in a straight line. This allowed me to crank the stroke's random tilt into a messy abstract scatter. Then I could animate this randomness down to 0 during the fast camera ramps. So rather than physically simulating motion blur, the painting responds to the shot's energy in a way that ties together the flat viewfinder we're looking through the painting, otherwise our canvas or our screen, into the behavior of the 3D world. And that brings us to compositing. This is where all the real magic happens. And for this style in particular, it's especially useful because the whole goal is to actually roughen things up and break away from that clean 3D look. So the first step here was to set all my main render passes up to export into a single multi-layer EXR file format. Diffuse, emission, AO, mist, specular, cryptomats. And now for the star of the show, Blender's Kuwahara filter. It takes those 3D landmarks and distorts them into something much more painterly and handcrafted. That went into the same EXR file too, and all of this was exported and imported into After Effects. The possibilities at this point are honestly as endless as working in a 3D package, but to really bring things back full circle towards those original Disney references, the final compositing recipe went a little something like this. Kuwahara filter was used as the base. During the slow camera sections, I actually revealed the original hand-painted sky texture again. I also added a colorized AO pass set to the divide blend mode, and this added a really nice vintage burn quality and crackle in the deepest shadow areas, making the whole piece feel slightly washed and aged. During the dark section, I needed to boost that lighting and to make it pop harder, so the second colorized AO pass this time was masked around the key light areas and set to screen. I also added an additional flickering layer of paint textures around those key light areas to act as a bit more painterly atmospheric flourish. Then a touch of blur to smooth all the fine details together, and then a sharpen on top of that to bring back that crispy definition. To round things off, we had a film grain to eliminate color banding in certain areas. The whole project was rendered at 30 FPS. I probably would have preferred it around 8 because I prefer lower frame rates, but at that rate it started to hide too much of the plant growth animation. 30 felt a little too buttery smooth and modern, and 15 was just the middle ground. And because the whole thing was rendered in one big master square, I had enough overscan to get both vertical crops for Reels and landscape versions for YouTube in one single output. So this all started with the core question of how could those Disney backdrop paintings look fully animated, and although I don't claim to have reached anywhere near their mastery, I feel like watching my own little painting blossom and bloom with all the nifty little tips and tricks I found as a step towards an answer. If anything surprised you about this workflow, or you still have any questions, drop a comment below and I'll be sure to get back to you. Until next time.